You know, I've been reflecting a lot lately on this new generation of adults, the ones who are stepping into their 20s and 30s right now, who are navigating what it means to grow up in a world that looks nothing like the one their parents or even their older siblings grew up in. And the more I think about it, the more I realize just how different their path is. Not better, not worse, just different. But within that difference lies something really worth paying attention to, because it's reshaping what adulthood even means. Let's start with the obvious: technology. For this generation, technology wasn't something that arrived halfway through their lives. It was there from the beginning. They grew up with the internet, with social media, with phones that aren't just phones, but lifelines. They didn't have to learn to adapt to it later. It's the environment they've always known. And that's given them some remarkable strengths. They can build communities across continents with just a few clicks. They can turn creative ideas into businesses from their bedrooms. They know how to access information, how to fact-check, how to problem-solve on the fly, often faster than the rest of us can even type a search term. But here's the flip side. That same technology is a double-edged sword. The constant stream of updates, comparisons, and opinions can create a background hum of pressure that never really shuts off. Imagine growing up where every achievement, every mistake, every thought can be broadcast, judged, or compared. For many of these young adults, the world has always been a stage. And sometimes that stage is exhilarating, but sometimes it's exhausting. Now, what I really admire about this generation is how deeply they care. They talk about things that older generations often avoided: mental health, inclusivity, fairness, sustainability. They've taken topics that were once whispered about in private and put them right out into the open. And to me, that's progress. But caring deeply also comes with challenges. When you're so aware of injustice, inequality, and instability, it can feel overwhelming. This generation is tuned into global problems in a way that no previous generation was, because the news, the trends, the movements, they're all right there in their pockets. The upside is awareness. The downside is burnout. Socially, they're interesting too. They don't necessarily buy into the traditional rules of adulthood. For their parents, milestones were pretty straightforward: finish school, get a stable job, buy a house, settle down, raise a family, retire. For many of today's new adults, that script feels outdated or simply unattainable. Instead, they're redefining what success looks like. For some, it's flexibility, working remotely, traveling, balancing side projects with paid work. For others, it's choosing experiences over possessions, community over competition. They're less concerned with status and more concerned with meaning. And again, there's a flip side. Sometimes the rejection of tradition isn't just about choice, it's about circumstances. Housing costs are higher, job markets are more unstable, and the idea of a lifelong career at one company feels like a fairy tale. So, while this generation is resourceful, their independence is also born out of necessity. Economically, they're carrying heavy burdens: student debt, rising costs of living, global instability, and that creates anxiety. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is a generation that worries a lot. Climate change, financial insecurity, political polarization. The weight is real. But even here, I see something hopeful. They don't just accept it passively. They question, they protest, they create new ways of organizing their lives. They don't take "that's just how it is" as an answer. Now, are they perfect? Of course not. No generation ever is. They can be impatient, wanting change overnight in a world that often moves at a crawl. They can be quick to judge, especially online, where outrage sometimes drowns out dialogue. They can feel so pulled in different directions that focus becomes hard to sustain. But then again, isn't that just the reality of living in a world that's more complex, more interconnected, and more demanding than ever before? I think one of the most fascinating qualities about today's young adults is their relationship with vulnerability. Older generations were often taught to hide it, to push through, to keep struggles private. But this generation, they put it out in the open. They say, I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed, I need help. And while some criticize that as weakness, I actually see it as strength. Because acknowledging vulnerability doesn't make you weaker, it makes you human. And it creates space for other people to be human too. Let me share a thought. Every generation is shaped by the world it inherits. The so-called greatest generation was shaped by war and hardship. The baby boomers by post-war optimism and growth. Millennials came of age during the internet boom and the 2008 financial crisis. And this new generation of adults, they are shaped by climate urgency, global connectivity, and constant change. So, of course, they look different. So, of course, they act differently. The pressures are different. The opportunities are different. The very definition of normal life has shifted. I don't see them as heroes, and I don't see them as failures. I see them as people, just like every generation before them, trying to make sense of the world they've inherited, trying to make choices that matter, and trying to build lives that feel meaningful, even when the old blueprints no longer work. And if there's one word that sums them up, I think it's this: questioning. They don't just follow the rules, they ask why. Why do we work the way we do? Why do we live where we live? Why do we measure success the way we measure it? Why are some voices heard and others ignored? That questioning makes them restless, sure, but it also makes them innovative. It's the spark that drives change. So when I look at the new generation of adults, I see resilience, I see creativity, I see anxiety, yes, but also courage. And maybe what unsettles people most about them is that they're not content to repeat the same patterns. They're rewriting what it means to be an adult in the 21st century. And that rewriting, that's going to affect all of us. Their story is still being written. And like every generation before them, they'll stumble, they'll course correct, they'll rise, they'll fall. But they'll also bring new ideas, new perspectives, and new ways of living that none of us have fully imagined yet. And personally, I find that exciting, because in their mix of hope and struggle, of lightness and weight, of questioning and creating, I see the possibility of a future that looks different. Not perfect, but maybe more honest, more open, and more human. So that's my take. The new generation of adults isn't a mystery. They're just people living in a world that demands more adaptability than ever before. And whether we agree with all of their choices or not, they're shaping the future. Which means maybe the best thing the rest of us can do is listen, learn, and recognize that their story is part of our story too. Please feel free to add your opinion and/or criticism in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you have not yet.